ABC News Special Report.
Good morning, I'm George Stephanopoulos, and we are coming on the air because we have just learned that the U.S. ambassador to Libya has been killed. It happened overnight. When angry militants stormed the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, they fired shots, set the building on fire. Almost a dozen Americans were inside being guarded by Libyan security. At least one other American died, most likely of smoke inhalation. And it appears the attack was inspired by an anti-Muslim film produced by an American-Israeli filmmaker living in California. That film also sparked protests and attacks on the U.S. Embassy in Cairo. Let's go right away to ABC's Martha Raddatz in Washington. And Martha, this is the first U.S. ambassador killed on duty in an attack since 1979.
It is indeed, George, and it's terribly, terribly horrific for the State Department and everybody who knows Ambassador Chris Stevens. He is a beloved member of the State Department diplomatic corps. He loved Libya, was passionate about Libya, has been there since the revolution, and just started as ambassador this past May. This has been breaking overnight.
And Martha, we also seen those protests against the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, all sparked by this film, Innocence of Muslims, an anti-Muslim film, pretty obscure, only shown once in a Hollywood theater, but it got out on YouTube and has inflamed militants around the world.
It certainly has, and the U.S. is very fearful this will continue. They consider this an extremely dangerous situation. They are watching all embassies in the area. They have gotten out all employees from Benghazi, sending them to Tripoli, but all embassies are clearly on alert because of this.
This has been a special report from ABC News.
The American flag over our embassy in Cairo, Egypt, ripped down and burned today. A large group of ultra-conservative Muslim protesters managed to scale the very high walls there, shred the flag, set it afire, then replace it with the black flag bearing the Muslim profession of faith. Hundreds of protesters marched on the embassy earlier today. They say they are furious over a video which demonstrators claim was made here in the United States. A video they say is insulting to Islam. And now, just developing, a similar incident across the border in Libya, where militants have apparently stormed a U.S. consulate.
Yeah, U.S. Embassy officials in Cairo tonight seem to be trying to defuse a protest that is actually growing by the hour. We understand that thousands of protesters are now outside the U.S. Embassy in Cairo, where officials released a statement which seemed to accept that this protest is the result of this reportedly anti-Muslim movie. But now we hear of this similar incident outside the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya.
The tense and volatile scene unfolding today at the American Embassy in Cairo, Egypt. And the source of all the fury, a film made in the U.S., which the protesters say insults Islam.
The protesters are furious about a movie which appears to have been made in America that they say insults the Prophet Muhammad. The new movie is being promoted by the likes of Florida pastor Terry Jones, who infamously burned a Quran in 2010.
It was a chaotic and terrifying scene. 20 gun-wielding attackers storming the American consulate in Benghazi. Ambassador Stevens was either killed by smoke inhalation or, more likely, in a car trying to escape with two guards, which may have been hit by a mortar. U.S. officials fear both incidents are a response to this low-budget, anti-Muslim film. It's so controversial in the Middle East, ABC News is not showing it. The movie was produced in the U.S. by an Israeli filmmaker who said he intended the film to be provocative and said Islam is a cancer. Muslims say it insults the Prophet Muhammad, depicting him as a fraud and womanizer. Many blame America for the film. And it's now being promoted by Terry Jones, the Gainesville, Florida pastor who angered the Muslim world in 2010 when he threatened to burn the Quran.
As gunfire rings out in Benghazi, the U.S. consulate burns. Those guarding the building were surprised and overwhelmed. They soon retreated as unknown gunmen shot at the compound and threw handmade bombs. It's believed the attack is in protest at a film produced in the US, which is said to humiliate the Prophet Muhammad.
Don't make our people angry, because they will kill, they will fight, they will do such a situation. This is a situation because of the Americans. channels. They want to say something bad about our prophet.
Okay, now an angry mob has just gone on a murderous rampage against U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya. 4 Americans have been killed, including the United States ambassador to Libya, a man who, in fact, helped lead the Libyan war and the independence of the Libyan people and the overthrow of Gaddafi. Now, violence has also erupted at the same time, within hours, at the United States Embassy in Cairo, Egypt. These attacks were apparently triggered by an independent film that nobody's seen, but was seen as ridiculing the Prophet Muhammad. Fox News senior foreign affairs correspondent Greg Palcott is covering the story from London.
Those killed include the former ambassador from the United States to Libya, Chris Stevens, an information officer by the name of Sean Smith, as well as 2 other Americans, possibly security. Their identity still not being revealed. The families still have to be notified. Stevens was a career diplomat, well regarded in the region. Now, to what was behind this killing. This is a result of a very complex attack by Islamists on this consulate. They were using KT, RPGs, rockets, machine guns, you'll have it. It was initially thought to be triggered by that film, that U.S.-made anti-Muslim film, at least it was made in the U.S. But now it's thought to be maybe a little bit more than that. That an al-Qaeda-linked group inside Libya might have been responsible for this killing. In fact, using a little bit the cover of this protest about this film as a way to move in. But of course, as you noted too, this followed basically an assault on the U.S. Embassy in Cairo just a few hours before yesterday, and we saw the U.S. flag being pulled down, and that in fact is a part of the reaction to this film for sure. A lot more security at a lot of embassies all across the region. There was one protester, for example, in front of the U.S. Embassy in Tunisia. So a complex picture, but maybe more to it than we initially thought, and perhaps no coincidence at all that this is all happening in the week that is the anniversary of the 9/11 attacks.
Good morning. Every day, all across the world, American diplomats and civilians work tirelessly to advance the interests and values of our nation. Often, they are away from their families. Sometimes, they brave great danger. Yesterday, 4 of these extraordinary Americans were killed in an attack on our diplomatic post in Benghazi. Of course, yesterday was already a painful day for our nation as we marked the solemn memory of the 9/11 attacks. And then last night, we learned the news of this attack in Benghazi. As Americans, let us never, ever forget that our freedom is only sustained because there are people who are willing to fight for it, to stand up for it, and in some cases, lay down their lives for it. No acts of terror will ever shake the resolve of this great nation, alter that character, or eclipse the light of the values that we stand for. We grieve with their families, but let us carry on their memory, and let us continue their work of seeking a stronger America and a better world for all of our children. Thank you. May God bless the memory of those we lost, and may God bless the United States of America.
Tonight, U.S. warships and 50 Marines are headed to Libya in the wake of the deadly attacks on the U.S. consulate in Benghazi.
And now the White House is investigating whether the killings were a planned terrorist attack. And all U.S. personnel have been evacuated from Benghazi, the second largest city in Libya.
American Ambassador Christopher Stevens, Foreign Service Officer Sean Smith, and 2 members of the consulate staff were killed in last night's attack. A mob of armed gunmen stormed the consulate, firing rocket-propelled grenades.
News Edge anchor Tom Haynes is live in Control 8 tonight with the latest on this still developing story. Tom?
Russ and Amanda, 4 Americans who were dedicated to putting Libya on a path to peace are now dead. At first, it was thought the attack was carried out in response to an anti-Muslim film. Tonight, officials think it was too coordinated and too professional to be spontaneous. And it came on the anniversary of 9/11. In cold blood, 4 Americans, including U.S. Ambassador to Libya Chris Stevens, are murdered by a mob in Benghazi On the 11th anniversary of the 9/11 terror attacks, top Obama administration officials now believe there are early signs the attack was planned to be tied to the 9/11 anniversary, and the protest outside the U.S. consulate in Libya related to an anti-Muslim movie was just a diversion.
We're learning more about those responsible for making the video that's triggered so much of the violence we've seen the last several days. Several cast and crew members say they were duped into working on a film last summer that was turned into a poisonous 14-minute trailer.
Hello there, Lester. Well, the State Department is temporarily closing U.S. embassies in Sudan and Yemen, warning U.S. citizens of the travel risks in those countries, as well as in Tunisia, where Americans are encouraged to leave as worries about more violent protests escalate.
But Friday's Day of Rage spread across more than 20 countries. In Tunisia today, local citizens and security personnel surveyed damaged cars and buildings at the U.S. Embassy, now protected by armored vehicles, while a U.S. Marine Rapid Response team took up positions at Yemen's charred U.S. Embassy and some Western hotels. But it wasn't all quiet. As far away as Sydney, Australia, hundreds of protesters clashed with riot police outside the U.S. consulate there, saying America had defiled their religion.
We're defending our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're defending his honor.
Some Egyptians say they were beginning to change their minds about America until that anti-Islam film clip appeared on the internet.
Now, as American embassies and symbols become prime targets around the world, the State Department is taking no chances.
Well, right now we know that Libyan officials have rounded up anywhere between 30 to 40 suspects. And these suspects right now, we don't know a lot about their particular role or what they may have been doing. We understand that some of them have valuable information that could shed light as to who are the perpetrators behind this attack. Perhaps some of them under the banner of foreign elements or foreign fighters that may have come in here, because the Libyan president is keen on saying that this is a pre-planned attack and it had the hallmarks of foreign fighters coming in to exploit that security vacuum in the country. And they're trying to piece together what actually happened that night. They've also shielded the U.S. compound to try and preserve any evidence that once FBI observers or FBI investigators rather arrive here, they can actually go and see for themselves. But so far, FBI investigators have not made it to Benghazi as of yet.
This was a lot more than some spontaneous demonstration against that film. Would that be fair to say?
Well, what we're hearing from Mohammed al-Magarief, who is the head of Libya's ruling General National Congress, is that the government does now believe that these attacks were in fact carried out by extremist groups. Whether they took advantage of the demonstrations, whether this attack would have gone forward even if these demonstrations had not been taking place, that we do not know. The motive behind that, to drive a wedge between the Libyan and American governments.
NBC's Ayman Mohyeldin is in Benghazi, Libya again this morning. Ayman, what can you tell us?
Good morning, Kate. We understand that an FBI team of special agents has arrived here in Benghazi. They're obviously keeping a low profile for security reasons and are expected to at some point begin investigating what exactly happened at that consulate. They're going to sift through the ashes of that building and look for any clues that can identify individuals involved in that attack. We know that the U.S. military as well has deployed its resources, including drones and other intelligence gathering mechanisms, to try and keep an eye and ear out for any of these people involved.
Joining me now, for the very latest, the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Susan Rice. Ambassador Rice, welcome back to Meet the Press. The images, as you well know, are jarring. We'll share the map of all of this turmoil with our viewers to show the scale of it across not just the Arab world, but the entire Islamic world.
For more on what happened and why, let's bring in the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Dr. Susan Rice. Dr. Rice, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, Jake.
So, first of all, what is the latest you can tell us on who these attackers were at the embassy or at the consulate in Benghazi? We're hearing that the Libyans have arrested people. They're saying that some people involved were from outside the country, that there might have even been al-Qaeda ties. What's the latest information?
Well, Jake, first of all, it's important to know that there's an FBI investigation that has begun and will take some time to be completed. That will tell us with certainty what transpired. But our current best assessment, based on the information that we have at present, is that in fact what this began as was a spontaneous, not a premeditated response to what had transpired in Cairo. In Cairo, as you know, a few hours earlier, there was a violent protest that was undertaken in reaction to this very offensive video that was disseminated. We believe that folks in Benghazi, a small number of people came to the embassy or to the consulate rather, to replicate this sort of challenge that was posed in Cairo. And then as that unfolded, it seems to have been hijacked, let us say, by some individual clusters of extremists who came with heavier weapons, weapons that, as you know, in the wake of the revolution in Libya are quite common and accessible. And it then evolved from there. We'll wait to see exactly what the investigation finally confirms, but that's the best information we have at present.
What we're hearing is that this blow up in Libya was somehow tied to a YouTube video of a movie or a trailer of a movie that may have been insulting to Islam or to the Prophet Muhammad.
The film doesn't represent the American government. It doesn't represent the spirit of the American people. And all people who really believe in God and tolerance and freedom of religion should condemn the film. But as Hillary said, this is no justification. So you start every statement you make about things like this condemning the killers.
The U.S. Air Force tonight is transporting the bodies of those killed, including the ambassador, to Germany. They will then be returned to their families in the United States. Live in Control A, Tom Haynes, Fox 5 News.
This is an ABC News special report.
Good afternoon, I'm David Muir here at ABC News headquarters in New York. We are interrupting your regular program to bring you some powerful images unfolding at this hour. These images just moments ago from Andrews Air Force Base, now known as Joint Base Andrews as well, where, as you can see, the caskets carrying the bodies of those 4 Americans killed in Libya about to be brought off the plane there and into a hangar on the base. Of course, among those killed, U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens, as well as Sean Smith, Glenn Doherty, Tyrone Woods. Their bodies have all been brought back home. You can see the caskets coming off the planes. Chris Stevens was a career diplomat and served 2 tours in Libya, helping the rebels actually save the city of Benghazi from Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. Sean Smith was an Air Force veteran who worked as an information management specialist. Glenn Doherty, a former Navy SEAL working for a private security, he was 42. His sister actually saying he was the best of the best. Went on to say he wouldn't have gone down for some protest over a movie. This was a serious, well-planned, well-executed attack. He was very good at what he did, in her words. And of course, Tyrone Woods, a former Navy SEAL who served multiple tours in Iraq, Afghanistan, 3 sons, and a family member saying he loved life, loved adrenaline. You could not find a more skilled SEAL than him. We're going to go to live pictures now. As you can see, Secretary Clinton there, President Obama. The families have gathered there in the hangar as well, we are told.
This has been a difficult week for the State Department and for our country. We've seen the heavy assault on our post in Benghazi that took the lives of those brave men. We've seen rage and violence directed at American embassies over an awful internet video that we had nothing to do with. It is hard for the American people to make sense of that because it is senseless. In the days since the attack, so many Libyans, including the ambassador from Libya to the United States, who is with us today, have expressed their sorrow and solidarity. One young woman, her head covered and her eyes haunted with sadness, held up a handwritten sign that said, "Thugs and killers don't represent Benghazi nor Islam." The president of the Palestinian Authority, who worked closely with Chris when he served in Jerusalem, sent me a letter remembering his energy and integrity and deploring, and I quote, "an act of ugly terror." I'm proud of all those across our government, civilian and military alike, who represent America abroad. They help make the United States the greatest force for peace, progress, and human dignity the world has ever known. If the last few days teach us anything, let it be this, that this work and the men and women who risk their lives to do it are at the heart of what makes America great and good. So we will wipe away our tears, stiffen our spines, and face the future undaunted. And we will do it together, protecting and helping one another, just like Sean, Tyrone, Glenn, and Chris always did. May God bless them and grant their families peace and solace. And may God continue to bless the United States of America.
For Americans, for patriots. They loved this country, and they chose to serve it and served it well. They had a mission, and they believed in it. They knew the danger, and they accepted it. They didn't simply embrace the American ideal, they lived it. They embodied it. The courage, the hope, and yes, the idealism. That fundamental American belief that we can leave this world a little better than before. That's who they were, and that's who we are. And if we want to truly honor their memory, it's who we must always be. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. Because of these patriots, because of you, this country that we love will always shine as a light unto the world. May God bless the memory of these men who laid down their lives for us all. May God watch over your families and all who love them. And may God bless these United States of America.
With their families looking on, President Obama speaking of the 4 Americans who lost their lives, saying today, Glenn, Tyrone, Sean, and Chris
For our conviction, we will stand together for the playing of the national anthem as we render honor to the nation that these men loved and for which they died. Let us pray. Almighty God, creator of us all and lover of the human race, we commend to you our brothers Chris and Sean and Glenn and Tyrone. Into your merciful hands receive them. Deliver them from all fear, strengthen them in your presence, and give them your peace. Amen.
We have seen so many Americans come home in the last decade, thousands, soldiers, Marines, but this is so unusual for the State Department. It's the first time in over 30 years an ambassador has been killed by violence. The State Department is not used to this. These are diplomats. Chris Stevens wasn't armed. They certainly have security. But for the most part, they are going out to see people. I was reading a statement, the mission statement of the State Department just now. It says, shape and sustain a peaceful, prosperous, just, and democratic world, and foster conditions for stability and progress for the benefit of the American people and people everywhere. That's how these people lived. That's how they died. There is nothing more powerful than seeing these caskets with the flag on top of them. I've been on these flights before. It is the most profound thing possible, David.